And now, fresh off a 30-year break from his life in over-the-air radio, here's the host of the most originally named 15 Years Too Late podcast, JaySapChats.
Brandy, how are you?
I'm doing great, Jay. How are you doing?
Doing well. I'm doing well. Welcome to the pod. No small talk, no banter. We jump right into it.
I like it. No nonsense approach.
Well, I tell you, I was in over-the-air radio for a long time, and one of the things I learned is that the most interesting conversations happen off the air.
Yeah.
And now I've done a few podcasts, and the hosts will invite me on, and we'll sit there and we'll talk for 5 or 10 minutes. And next thing you know, I've given them 3-4 of my best stories. And, they're like, do me a favor. When we get on air, I want you to just repeat that. I'm like, listen, I don't know how to repeat it. You're going to have to prompt me the exact same way. So here we are.
Yeah, I've had that happen so many times, and it just feels so not authentic to come back to that, where it's like, okay, what you said before I push record, let's do that again.
Well,
yeah,
that's
so
the
I appreciate
whole goal,
this.
Right? I'm doing this because I want people to know who I am. I want authenticity. I want enough data points out there so that when I engage with somebody and we're talking about swag or merch or business or whatever it might be, that they feel like they know me or have a relationship with me. And I just don't, there's no way to, and like in my world, there's no way to do that unless you're actually who you are. And, who I am is, it's kind of a mashup of a bunch of different things. But I feel like doing 15 minutes before we get on and start talking is just kind of disingenuous to this process.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it, Jay. It's fun to be here. Thanks for inviting me on.
Awesome. Well, we're
Am
talking
I your first guest?
So we're talking with Brandy Whalen, who is the co-founder of Kitcaster. Full disclosure, Kitcaster is, you can talk about what your business is, but from what I can share about what it is it's really a podcast. It's a podcast agency, and they work with folks on both the production side and also to get them booked on other people's podcasts. So, is that a fair assessment of what Kitcaster is?
That's very fair. Yeah. So we really work with folks, mostly entrepreneurs, C-suite executives, and get them placed on podcasts that are meaningful to them, that are meaningful to their message in front of audiences that they want to be speaking to.
All right. So I came to you and I said, hey, Brandy, it's great that I'm getting booked on all these podcasts. I'm really enjoying my experience, but why don't I start my own podcast? Because I had always been fearful of doing it. So we had booked a time and you had asked me, you said, why don't you just start? And I was concerned about starting and then burning through some people that I thought would be great guests early when I have 2 subscribers on YouTube. I got no one. I don't even think my wife's going to listen to this. And you said to me, I'll be your first guest. And what did I say to you?
You said you'll be my first and my 100th.
Yes. I only need to have you on as my first if I could have you on as my 100th. And then the more I do light research into these because I really want to have a conversation and get to know you, right? So, 2 old friends catching up, but where have you been type of stuff, right? And get to know who you are. I realize I'm talking to somebody that's you're very much a lot of people's early on guests. You are on, no, I'm not trying to offend you when I say this, but you are on more podcasts that nobody ever sees than any person I've ever seen in my life.
I'm never going to say no to a conversation is the thing, because I think every conversation is a conversation worth having. I don't discriminate against any podcast host and audience size. I just want to have conversations. I just feel like they're so important, and especially now.
All right. And people have to start somewhere. And look, by telling me you would be my first guest, you opened up my sort of ability to now I've booked, I'm 10, 12 deep now in guests booked for the pod and moved the production along and like, here we go. Right. So, all right, let's talk about you because I invited you on to learn about you. All right. So we're sort of, you live in Denver now, right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. And where were you born?
I was born in Iowa.
Iowa.
Midwest gal.
All right.
Yeah. And I lived there until I was 23 and then moved to
city in Iowa
Denver.
were you born in?
So I was born in Cedar Rapids.
Okay.
I don't know if you're familiar with Cedar Rapids.
How big is it?
Yeah. It's not very big. I am not even sure what the population of Cedar Rapids is, but I mean, if we're talking Iowa size towns, cities, it's big, on the bigger side. I don't know what that means to the listeners, but in Iowa terms, it's on the bigger side.
All right. So any brothers and sisters?
Yes, I have a brother.
Okay. Older, younger?
My baby brother. He is actually 11 years younger than me.
11 years younger than you?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's kind of
I know.
Same parents?
Same parents. Yeah, same parents. Yeah, that's...
Wow. I mean, talk about built-in... I mean, you were the built-in babysitter in some ways.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was the best birth control of all time. It was smart. More parents should probably plan that way. Your
brother was the best birth control for you. Because you were like, I'm not having a baby at 17 years old. No way. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Like that. I mean, like the 11 years. I mean, so it's the two of you and it's 11 years. I mean, that had to be like something, right? Like that's a different way to grow up, right? I mean, that's
very different.
So what's that like? You're baby, right? You're 11. I mean, 11 years old. There's like kids that babysit at 11 years old.
Oh, yeah. I took care of him. Definitely. I babysat him. I mean, it was, he was my little brother. I was probably the worst babysitter that my parents could have. I mean, I was a teen. I wanted to sleep in and, babies need things. They need things early. And as he grew into like toddler age, I like vividly remember like pulling myself out of bed basically to like give him a bowl of cereal, put him in front of cartoons, and then putting myself back to bed again.
Oh, wow. So, do you think your parents expected you to be the babysitter, or were they gracious towards it, or like how do you process that when you look back on it?
Yeah, I don't think they necessarily expected me to. They were definitely gracious, and I wanted to. I don't think I wasn't necessarily resistant to it. No.
So you liked having a baby brother?
Yeah, I didn't. There were certainly moments, I will say, especially as I got older, that, my parents, there's just things like even when I was in college and, my parents would come for the weekends and I wanted to like go out with them. I was like able to go to the bars, but they had like a little kid, so I felt like that was kind of limiting to them. And I remember feeling like, what a bummer, But I can say this, my brother now, it is interesting because there is an 11-year age difference. As soon as he turned, I would say probably 22, we became really close. He's my best friend.
Oh, wow.
We talk all the time.
Oh, wow. Yeah, so it's interesting. A lot of times, we talk about the entrepreneurial journey. We talk about leadership. We talk about all these business things, but we don't trace these business things back to the roots of the business pieces, right? Which is like, those roots are embedded. I'll give you an example. My wife is one of four. All four were under 4 at some point. My sister and I are 6 years apart. They're just like you, right? Not as wide of a gap. Like, I have no relation to that. Having a 14-year-old, having a 12-year-old, an 11-year-old, 4 siblings under, within a 4-year range. There's a closeness that exists your entire life with something like that. And it just emotionally, it shapes you, whether you believe it or know it or not. It's not to say they're all the same relationships or they're all the same dynamics in every family. Obviously, the parents come into it. There's, tons of factors. I'm not looking to put anybody on a couch. But it really is the, early roots of why and how and where and what we ended up as.
Yeah, no, I truly, I agree with that 100%. I think that definitely the dynamic between my brother and I growing up, very different. I mean, I was an only child until I was 11. And I do think looking at my peers, my friends, most of my friends were one of 3 or 4 in their family and close. We're talking like 1 to 2 years. So it creates a different sort of situation and scenario. And then when my brother came, it wasn't a brother-sister relationship. I was a caregiver to him.
For sure. For a
took
lot
care
of
of him.
Yeah.
For a lot of years.
Yeah. I mean, so my sister went to Westchester University. It was 7 miles from where we grew up. And I saw her come home on the weekends to do laundry. My parents pop in and see her. I mean, I went to UNLV 3,000 miles on the other side of the country. That's not a coincidence.
Yeah.
I didn't want that same experience that I saw my sister go through. And she went through it so far in advance of me that I had time to be able to program it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
they kind of paved the way for you, right?
Yeah, because Vegas was such a big part of my story and still is a big part of my story. I joke, but I went to an idiot school and I did. But even though I worked at a dry cleaners there that helped put me through there. I worked as a valet parker on the Las Vegas Strip. I traveled with the UNLV basketball team. It was legendary. I mean, and Vegas is Vegas. So fast forward to my sales career, you sit in somebody's office, you tell them you went to UNLV. I mean, they went somewhere else and want to know what it's like to go to college in Vegas. I mean, that's a conversation steering and shaping experience that I had in many ways because of my much older sister.
Yeah. What made you decide to go to Vegas?
Oh boy. Vegas was a decision because I love to gamble. I was raised in a gambling household. My dad was, took me to the track every day as a kid. And when he didn't go, I ended up kind of taking the family torch. So I wanted to be exposed and around gaming, which I was. I had a buddy whose brother ended up going there. The school got a lot of attention because of their basketball team, so that was super exciting. And when I was 16 years old, instead of going on my class trip, I went out to Las Vegas. So when you're 16 and you're in Las Vegas, I mean, that's different than growing up.
It's impactful.
It's different than growing up in the suburbs of outside of Philadelphia, where, you sort of, it just insulated a little bit. And it was quite the experience. So, all right. So you have an 11-year-old younger brother. All right. Yep. He's born. You're in middle school. When's your first job? What's like the first out of the house employment? Like, what do you do?
Yeah. So there was so I grew up in a very small town, West Liberty, Iowa. It's a population 2,000.
Wow. How many in the school?
So I had a graduating class of 85.
Wow.
But it pulled also from small surrounding towns. But there was
What color brick was the schoolhouse?
It was red. It was red brick.
Of course it was.
I don't actually think it's around still. I believe they tore it down and rebuilt because it was very old.
Yeah.
So we didn't have very many eating establishments in West Liberty, Iowa, but one opened up in our town, and I was like, you know what? I want to work here. And really for no good reason. I didn't know what type of restaurant this was going to be. I walk in, I turn in my application. I was 14 at the time.
Okay.
So I was going to be turning 15. So I was like, this is it. I need a job. I need to make things happen here. So I rode my bike to this little this little restaurant. The restaurant was called Cookies, and it was the strangest mix. It was like DQ, Dairy Queen inspired with like some Subway influence. So it was like an ice cream fried food / sub shop. It was the most bizarre pairing, but the couple that owned and bought the establishment, they had a bakery in a neighboring town. So they made like fresh bread.
Oh, wow.
So the subs that we made were made on this delicious. It was incredible. This delicious fresh bread. But then they had this other vision of like we got trained how to make ice cream. Like these folks from a Dairy Queen that was 30 miles away came in for a weekend and showed us how to make all of the Dairy Queen staples.
So you had access as a 14, almost 15-year-old to a soft serve ice cream machine and a deep fryer at the same time.
I know. It's dangerous. So dangerous. Yes.
Those are like the two best inventions in like food service.
I know. Yeah. It was a lot of responsibility. And I worked there for 2 years, and I was promoted to manager. The couple that owned Cookies did not spend a lot of time there. So they mostly were at their bakery. And so I held the keys to open and close the establishment.
I mean, so, all right, as an entrepreneur, right, you like look back on that and you're thinking to yourself, wow, these people, like, do you ever financially think about what they put into it and their investment, and that they
all the time
it to you as a 14 or 15-year-old to manage this location?
Yeah, I do now. At the time, I was just like, I had no...
At the time, you're frying food and you have the soft serve ice cream machine. You thought it was heaven.
I thought it was the best thing ever. Is looking back on it, it's pretty wild. I mean, I give them mass credit for venturing into a new community with a new concept, allowing a 15-year-old, and I had a friend, he was 16, and he also worked there, also held the keys to the establishment, but letting two youths under the age of 18 pretty much manage your shop is pretty wild. It's
like,
pretty
would you
wild.
do all the food ordering and...
No. They would do all of that. So they did all kind of the back end. We were really just in charge of opening, closing, but all of that, closing out the registers,
but
handling all the cash.
You got severe weather in Iowa, right? I mean, like, there had to be times you had to make the
call whether
you were going to
make the call that the tornadoes were rolling through. Yeah, yes.
Like,
yeah.
All right. I mean, I'm guessing you learned that it's hard to sell ice cream in the winter, right?
It shifted for sure. Yes. Not as much ice cream sold in the winter.
Yeah.
And that was actually very interesting too. Like you were just saying, like sourcing goods, right? Like you just making sure to plan for the inconsistencies of traffic, right? Mm-hmm. Like how much bread do you need? How much materials is needed to stay open, to maintain,
well, food's
to not sell out.
I mean, it can be spoiled.
Really hard.
And, ice cream specifically, I mean, Dairy Queen for the longest time closed during the winter months in their winter location.
Yes.
I mean, they literally would board the doors up and say, we'll see you back and if you go to most vacation towns now where they have soft serve ice cream, those places, right, which is really what in many cases, that's what they do. They close up. But this was an annual, year-round operation.
Yeah. It just shifted. Less ice cream, more cookies. It was open until I left to go to college, and I don't know when they closed, but they're definitely not there anymore. So I'm not sure how long they lasted, but I want to say probably 10, 15 years.
Oh, that's a long time.
It's not so bad.
Did they serve cookies?
They did serve cookies.
Okay, makes sense.
And then you could also special order cakes and pastries. They were really the bakery that they owned, kind of the mothership, was delicious. It was great. It was just it was interesting that they departed from that to something different.
Yeah.
Because I think if they would have just stayed with their staple, it probably would have been more successful. But
crazy, right? Like, you got a concept going, you could just mint that concept and move it to a different town. You know that business cold, but instead of minting the concept and going to someplace where there's more population or another population that you can leverage your brand loyalty to, you start something completely different. You have no idea as a 15-year-old, how would you know something like that? But you look at it now and you can see people still make that mistake. It's still out there. Crazy. Yeah. So is that your only job in high school? You're 15, 16, that's your only job until you go to college?
No, I actually ended up working my senior year. I had classes in the morning, and then in the afternoon, I worked at a daycare, but it was geared towards children who had disabilities.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that's what I did my senior year and into college, actually.
Were you a good student in high school?
Yeah. I was a decent student. I definitely have an entrepreneurial mind. Like, I was always scheming from a very young age. I just felt like
that's an interesting word to use with respect to entrepreneurialism.
Scheming business ideas. Yes.
Okay. No, yeah. I mean, look, I know, look, scheming always has a negative connotation, but scheming to me doesn't have to be, right? Scheming is like always thinking of an angle, right? Or thinking of a way to think. Like, where do you think that came from? Was it your parents? Did you have an uncle? Like, where were an aunt?
Yeah.
Origin of...
I think my parents. I think it came from my parents. They were, they didn't come from a lot, and they just kind of figured out ways to make things work. And I got to watch my dad kind of move up through the ranks of the company that he was with, just starting really from the bottom and working his way to a really good position. And I think that inspired me to always be thinking about how I could turn something into a business. So
he was corporate, he wasn't on his own.
He was not on his own. He was corporate.
Yeah.
No.
Did that inspire you at all to be on your own or take the route you took? Or did it not, no factor really when you look back?
Maybe a little bit. Even though he was corporate, the way that he operated was a little rogue. Like, he had really kind of more of an entrepreneurial spirit, even in a corporate environment, which I think ended up being incredibly successful for him. So I think even though I got to watch him on this journey in a corporation, the way that he maneuvered had more of an entrepreneurial lean to it.
Well, interesting. So, and our parents are with us, not everyone's, but mine were, yours were. We're with them all the time. And, I could tell you my entrepreneurial journey was kind of baked in the cake, right? I watched my dad hate his job and sacrifice his dream so he could put food on the table and have a secure lifestyle with my, with my mom and my sister and me. And he just was not a happy man. He just did not live a life where he was a happy man, and counted down the days to when school was over. And he was a teacher, counted down the days to when he didn't have to be there. And it's like, I swore I would never live a life like that. Like, to me, it's like the ultimate hell. So definitely helped shape me. So how many colleges? All right. So you're in Iowa. Is it, I want to get out of Iowa, or I want to stay in Iowa, or like, how many colleges do you apply for? Take me through that process. You're 17, right? And you're thinking, right, bright lights, big city. I'm a country gal. Where are you?
I was thinking, I don't have a lot of options.
Really?
No, there wasn't really the thought of leaving, I guess. I didn't have funding, first of all, for college. So I had to really consider the financial impact of where I was going to go. And I just went to the closest college, which was the University of Iowa, which is a great school.
How far? So were you living at home and going there?
I wasn't living at home. I had roommates, but it was 20 miles away from my hometown. So it wasn't very far. So I was able to come home, but I lived in Iowa City, next to the university.
Okay. And what's the major? What are you thinking you're going to do? Like, what's the 19-year-old Brandy Whalen? Well, Whalen's your married name, right? Or is that your
name? No, this is my married name. Yeah. So it was Anderson actually. And
so Brandy Anderson. What's the 19-year-old Brandy Anderson's life of dreams?
I had absolutely no idea. Zero idea of what I wanted to do. No idea.
None.
I liked none. I liked communications, so I was like, maybe I'll be a communications major. I really liked art in high school. I was in drawing, painting, photography. I did some digital media, and I ended up gravitating more towards art in college. So I did studio art with an emphasis in metalworks, and I did art history. So I double majored in both of those, which does not lend itself to a great career path, let me tell you.
You don't think so?
Studio art and art history degree.
No.
Not a lot to be done in that space.
Yeah,
post-graduation.
I don't know. I mean, my oldest was a theater major, and my wife would always lament that she had no idea what she was going to do with her degree, and she ended up taking a job in sales, and she's really good at it.
Yeah, I did sales too. That's what I did when I got out of college. It was.
Well, I mean, one could argue that your creativity in college helps you in your sales career.
Yeah, definitely, and I think just committing to a major and expanding your mind and your thoughts and how you perceive things, I think that benefits you in the long run.
Yeah. So
absolutely.
All right. So you're making miniature statues when you're in college? Is that like legit what you're doing?
Yeah. I did metal, ceramics. No, I got rid of everything when we moved to Colorado. Kind of severed. Yeah.
You didn't keep one.
Are you trying to buy some?
Well, no, I just think it's odd that all right, true. I'm a pack rat.
Oh, I'm not.
You're not?
Oh, no, I get rid of everything. I still have paintings and drawings. I have things that were reasonable. Listen, like when my husband and I moved we were married already I was finishing up college and we were married.
Is this so we had?
Yes.
So you're a graduate. You graduated. You're a Hawkeye.
I'm a Hawkeye. Okay. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But we had a small pickup truck that we were driving to Colorado with all of our belongings. Like there was no way that I was taking anything that was 3D and large. I could take 2D and small.
Is that have you always been that way? Have you always been able to just throw things away?
Oh, yeah. I have no attachments. I think it drives my parents crazy because they're always trying to like offload sentimental things. And I don't. I don't need that. Just get rid of it.
I worked a trade show. 10, maybe 11 years ago with my son.
Yeah.
And some guy was doing this display where, it like cured your back or whatever, like with this bracelet.
Oh, yeah. I've seen those before. Yeah. It's like a metal, like magnet.
All right. My people call it Michigas. Okay. It's nonsense. Okay. It's total nonsense. All right. But
you're wearing it.
I bought it. I just told you I'm a pack rat.
Bought it with your son. It's sentimental.
I bought it with my son. He bought one. His actually was not metal. It was elastic, and his broke.
Okay.
Right. I kept his broken. I'm nuts.
Yep.
Broken.
Yeah. Where is it?
I got a little box at my house. It's broken, and I still wear mine like a lunatic.
It's sweet. That's sweet.
Yeah, sort of. I guess maybe if it was a huge.
We're totally opposite. We are 100% opposite. I have no. Everyone actually makes fun of me. They'll like come over. They're like, I constantly have bags to donate to folks, and I have no attachments.
So like walking in your house is like I'm staying at a W hotel.
Kind of.
Is that what it's like? Like everything is like. So my wife, God bless her. My wife and I are very similar. She can't throw anything away.
Oh, gosh.
It drives me crazy. Listen, we're not an episode of hoarders.
You're not like hoarders. Yeah. Okay.
No,
Okay.
no.
All
We're
right.
not hoarders.
I
But
can't. Yeah. I feel like I would be able to see that.
We put it in the attic. We're not hoarders. So hold on. This is terrible. She can't have a blank space on a counter without putting something.
What? Where do you food prep? What happens? You have to clear things off before you.
Over time, you have to clear things off. So it's this. It built, and then you clear it off, and then it built, and then you clear it off. I mean, it's not episode of hoarder stuff, but it's not healthy. It's not. It's certainly not like I don't want to live. Now that we have, well, I'll give you an example, right? Our 3 kids are out of the house. We have one who's a freshman in college. All right. The other 2, one lives in New York City. The other is moving to New York City. He's graduating in June. Why is the one who's 24 and has an apartment in New York City, why is her room not my upstairs office already? She doesn't want to hear it, but like, what are we waiting?
It's a museum, right? Just, you got to hold that space. It's a relic.
I need you. I need you to come and there's people.
I'll have no issues.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I will clean that out. No problem.
All right. So,
that thing would be transitioned to your office within 2 hours.
So good. All right. So we're talking to Brandy Whalen. She is the co-founder of Kitcaster, and we're going to get to how that came about. But let's get to Colorado first.
Okay.
So you moved to Colorado, all right? And you and your husband, you're married at this point.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
No kids. How long?
No kids.
All right. Why Colorado?
We both grew up in Iowa, and we just decided that we needed to leave, and it was far enough. We both loved Colorado. We got married in Colorado. This is just, we just felt like this needed to be our home, and it was far enough, yet close enough. Like, we could drive home if we needed to, but it was far enough away from where we grew up. So we packed up a little red Ford Ranger with all of our belongings, which was not much because we were college students and nothing we had needed to go with us. We drove to Denver. We rented just a small apartment and started building our lives and careers. He had a job. He had a career to jump into. He was moving for
a job, technically?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So we at least had that. I did not have a job yet. So it was my mission when we landed in Denver. I hit the streets with like resume in hand. Like, this is before, I mean, definitely people were emailing, but we're talking like 2003.
Yeah.
I had my resume. I went into marketing agencies, places that I just thought were interesting. I handed them my resume. I wanted to talk to people. I needed to like face-to-face have a conversation.
You cold called door to door?
I cold called for a job.
Door to door. Yeah.
Door to door.
Yeah. Okay. So,
yes.
Right. And this is really, the internet has taken off, but it hasn't taken off. So not everybody had websites at that time. And that's hard to believe, right? It's 22 years ago, but like,
I know.
everybody had a website back then.
Seems odd, right?
Yeah. Super odd. So who gives you the first chance? Who's the human?
So I stumbled into this really cool marketing agency downtown Denver and talked to this fabulous woman who was just in transit. Like, she was literally just going to the bathroom, and I caught her and she was like, hi. And she ended up engaging me for 15 minutes. We just chatted, and she was like, we don't have a position here, but let me take your resume. I'll put some feelers out to folks. So she ended up connecting me to 3 different people, and I ended up interviewing with all 3, and then took one of the jobs that she actually introduced me to. None of them were marketing agencies, but they were clients of hers.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you made that much of an impression on her, she would risk her reputation to refer you to clients that paid her.
Yes.
Super impressive.
Yes. 15 minutes. 15 minutes.
All right. So that's your first big sale ever.
That was my first big sale. And I took a sales position.
Which doesn't hurt, because who doesn't want to have a sharp, young, bright, aggressive, and willing salesperson out on the streets working for them?
Yeah. Yeah, it was, and it was really interesting. It was the most intense interview process I had ever gone through. I ended up having to give a presentation. I think I did 5 in-person interviews with this company.
Crazy.
And my last interview was I had to give a presentation as if I were selling this service to a room full of executives. It was very nerve-wracking.
You get the job.
And I got the job.
And what are you selling?
So it's interesting. I feel like it's like an episode of The Office, like selling paper, but we were actually selling blueprints.
Okay.
So blueprinting. So I was working with architects, construction, engineering, and it was one of the first companies to actually digitize big paper blueprint drawings. You know, I don't know how many people that are listening have a vision of this, but
don't worry about it. Nobody's listening.
They're huge.
Nobody's listening.
That's right. That's
this
right.
Is
Nobody's
just
listening.
You having a conversation.
Yes, it's
I'm
ground
curious
zero.
about it. I'm interested in it. So that's all you need to worry about for this.
You've seen architectural plans, construction plans.
Yes, of course.
They're massive.
Yes.
Right? They're like bound, they're massive, especially for huge projects. So the whole idea being that, you know, you have a structural engineer. Well, they don't need the mechanicals necessarily. Or if you're a plumber, you don't need certain aspects of the drawings. Like each discipline needs a set of drawings. They don't need the whole 150-page printed out version.
In fact, it's a hindrance for them to have it, actually.
It's a hindrance. It's annoying. It's a nuisance. So we were able to digitize them, and people could go on and just order what they needed depending on what trade, what discipline, if they were, you know, whatever their view was, they could order just those. So I would go on to construction sites. Like I had a hard hat, I had a safety vest, and I would go into the trailer where the architects and engineers were, whatever the GC who was running the whole project. So I was going in and trying to land all of the printing for that entire project.
I mean, you must have killed, right? I mean, there just can't be many women that are walking on those sites. My wife is in construction. Believe me, not many women that are in construction.
She knows. Yes.
She does.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
and it's like a delicate dance, right? Like you have to kind of you have to walk the walk, talk the talk.
Yeah.
They're a no nonsense crew. Yeah,
for sure. I mean, it's not a bat your eyes dainty level position. I mean, these guys probably challenged you to know what you were talking about more than they would challenge a guy to know what they were talking about.
100%. And then so you talk to an architect, very different from an engineer. Yeah. Very different from a GC. So I had to really figure out how I was going to approach each one of those audiences and what I needed to tap into, what they cared about. It was an amazing first job. I had a lot of fun. How long did you last at it? I was there for 5 years. I was there until I had my second child.
Got it. Okay. All right. So you became a mom now, and then you have your second child, right? You have two children?
I have 3.
You have 3, right. Okay. So you have 3 children. So you leave that job. Do you go back into the workforce full time, or do you stay home and you're working at raising your children?
Yeah. So at that point, I actually went back to school because I really loved the industry that I was selling into, and I enjoyed urban planning. So I wanted to go back to school.
You and George Costanza.
Me and George. To be an urban planner. So
I mean, that's some jokes right there. So I mean, urban planning. I mean, that's.
I know. I went right into it. Didn't I?
No, it's like anybody who grew up in the Seinfeld. It's almost like George Costanza put the entire industry of architecture, design, like Mike Brady
on the map.
Well, Mike Brady took it to one level, right?
He did.
George Costanza, which is interesting because the people who wrote Seinfeld grew up in the Mike Brady era. So Mike Brady influenced, I'm convinced of this. Mike Brady.
This is your theory. They haven't actually talked about this. Larry David has not talked about this.
I'm not in Reddit chat groups at 4 a.m. looking through to see whether or not someone else has had this theory. I am having this theory.
Okay.
Mike Brady influenced George Costanza wanting to be an architect and an urban planner. And we're going to see there's going to be a next iteration at some point in some future show, which is going to toggle off of the Seinfeld based on the Seinfeld aged folks. So, okay.
I can't wait.
You wanted to be an urban planner. You go to...
Yeah, so I went to Metro State, is like a state university here in Denver. So I went back to Metro State to get some of my core science classes taken care of. And in that process, I fell in love with geographic information systems, which is mapping. It's mapping. It's a part of urban planning, but I loved it. It kind of like tapped into my analytical brain and my creative brain, because I got to make like, you know, the analytics of data crunching and then the visuals of creating maps that you have to then people are looking at to get all of this information. So I ended up transferring over to DU, which is another university here in Denver, to finish up GIS, my GIS degree.
So you get your master's.
And yes. And then I got pregnant with my third son. Just really disrupted things a little bit. And that's when I decided to stay home for a while. I did a few projects in GIS. It kept bringing me back. It was very interesting because in the world of GIS, lots of different places that you can take this, one of which is marketing. So kind of determining, you know, demographics of certain areas and how to target. It was like geo-targeting. I got pulled back into marketing, even though I was like trying to do something different, but it just kept coming back to me. So, but once I had my third son, I totally took a step back and didn't really want to come back into the workforce.
Yeah. Well, I listen. Anyway. I mean, the third's the best anyway. So.
Well, you've got to, you know, you've practiced on two.
Right.
Your third one's going to be your best product, right?
Well, the other two leave you. The third one's still around. So, you know, it feels like they're there the longest, right? They extend the timeline in which they're home. So as you get older, you realize the third one's the best. The other two don't like hearing it, but screw them. They're gone, right?
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
converting the other one's room already. I told you that. So you obviously you love your kids and family, and you're, you know, raising them, and it's your choice. It's something I've not had to deal with. My wife has, because she was out of the workforce, outside the home for a long time. I mean, is there like, are you getting tugged out, or so busy that you don't think about it? Like, I mean, is there anything where you're like, is it some days is good, some days are bad? Is it like this yo-yo? I mean, because you're out of the workforce here. I mean, again, working at home is incredibly difficult. Glad I didn't have the job per se, but that lasts years.
Yeah.
It's probably your longest role.
Yeah.
What's that like?
Yeah. I mean, it's a constant tug, first of all. I feel, for me it is. For some it's not. And that's lovely and great. But I always felt like there was a piece missing. So I stayed at home with my kids for, I would say full time, for about 1.5 years. But always had this pull and was involved. Like, I was involved. Don't laugh. And I hope none of the non-listeners make fun of me. But I was on the PTA because it just felt like a good use of time, right? Like, I was like, I've got this time. I want to be on the PTA.
All right.
So I ran this business partner program for the school, a fundraising initiative. So I would get businesses to sponsor the school. We'd hang their banner up. We'd do little write-ups in the newsletter. So here I am, selling again. I can't help myself.
All right. So you stayed active in the PTA. You said you were only out for like 1.5 years. Did you go back to work full-time then after 1.5 years?
Yes.
All right. So you, that's a different experience than my wife had I mean, she was out of the workforce for almost 10 plus years.
Yeah. Yeah. Very different. Yeah. It's interesting. So I had
different, Brandy.
Everyone's different.
Like, everybody they have to figure out what's right for them, what's right for their family. I mean, you at home for 10 years might actually hurt your relationship with your kids. You just don't know.
I mean, I think I reflected a lot on this, and I feel like I am a better human.
Yeah.
If I'm working, and there's no such thing as work-life balance. That is total bullshit.
Uh-oh.
But I do think I have created good boundaries around work and life. And so parenting and being a good partner, like being a good friend, like I have created good boundaries around those. And it makes me a better human all around, better mom, better partner, better friend. But it's different for everyone. So I'm volunteering my time at the school, doing all sorts of fundraising initiatives. And a mom comes up to me and she was like, "Are you writing this content in the newsletter? It's really good." And I was like, "Yeah, that's me." And she was like, "What do you do?" And I'm like, "What do you mean?" She was like, "Well, what do you do for a living?" And I'm like, "Well, currently this and raising my family." She's like, "Well, I have a PR firm. And have you ever thought about doing public relations?" And I'm like, "Well, I've, done aspects of that throughout my life and career, but I've never done that full time." And she's like, "Well, let's get coffee." So I started working with her. I did contract work with her, and she ended up kind of building my own PR business because she would have people come to her. It wasn't quite big enough for her to take on. The contracts weren't. So she would just kick them over to me to work on. And I started my own PR agency.
You branch off from her and start your own agency. And that's your first ever Brandy Whalen Enterprises.
Yeah, that's right.
Relations agency with an embedded layer of clients that you accumulated while you were working for somebody else on her behalf, those clients.
Yeah, and I still worked with her. So I would still do contract work with her clients, and then also had my own firm. So it was Whalen Media, and I ran that for 5 years before. I've got this trend now that I'm looking back on it. It's 5 years. Okay. I get that 5-year itch.
What happens at 5 years?
At 5 years, I started Kitcaster.
Okay, and take me through the start of Kitcaster, because I became friendly with your business partner, Ryan.
Yes.
And that's, that was my introduction to the firm. How do you know him? How did you guys get together?
So Ryan is still a podcast host, but he had this awesome podcast in Denver. It was the Denver Business Podcast. So he would highlight, it was a great show. And he's like OG podcaster, like
really?
one of the, like he's been doing this forever. Okay. And I would put my clients on his show.
But like a regional podcast.
Yes, but he ended up transitioning to broadening to beyond the confines of Denver. So more of like, I think he relabeled it to Talk Launch, where he would just interview entrepreneurs.
Okay.
But he had this sweet recording studio in downtown Denver. So I would bring my clients there. They would do a recording. They loved it. Like they loved podcasting. It wasn't the core focus of what I would do for them in a PR campaign, but I would start to incorporate podcast guesting. So Ryan and I became friendly through that. I was working with him by pitching my clients to his show, prepping him,
right.
Getting
like,
my clients.
Who is this pit bull and how do I get more of her on my side?
Yeah. So we started having coffee and lunch just like colleagues.
Yeah.
And we just had been talking about doing something together. And at first we were like, we should start, we will create kind of like a podcast in a box sort of thing where you're like, "I'm Jay, I want to create a podcast." We're like, "Cool, this is the process. This is what we're going to do."
Not sure I sound like that, but I mean,
I'm going to try. I'll try harder.
A very dismissive and trivial way to say, to sound like me, but okay. I mean, you could have picked any name, but I'll go with it.
All right. Bob calls us up, sorry, Jay. And I'll work on a better impression of you.
All good. No, it's all right. I don't bruise that easily.
But the concept being we would launch people's podcasts, but have like a very productized version.
Okay.
But we were like, you know what? That's kind of a heavy lift to start with. I'm like, why don't we just lean into what I'm doing already? It's PR, but we just focus solely in on podcasting, where we'll put folks on a podcast only campaign. So Ryan reached out to all of the folks that he'd had on his show over the years, like a couple thousand. Those were our first clients. And basically like, this is what we're doing. Is this a service you would pay for? Many said yes. And then we just hit the ground running and figured it out.
Describe the service.
So we started out with it was a 3-month campaign. This was like our original offering. And over the course of 3 months, we would book 10 podcast interviews for our client based on what they could bring to the conversation, their target audience. So that was really our core offering. Since then, we work with clients on a continuous basis. So we're really just looking for the best possible opportunities for our clients to get their message out on podcasting. And then we're also on the backside now creating small pieces of content so that they can continue that thought leadership on social channels.
Yeah. Well, it's a real challenge, right? So when you think about one of the hesitations to either starting a podcast or putting yourself out to become in the podcast world is it's a pain to book guests on your podcast, and it's really hard to become a guest on podcasts. And There's tons of services out there, like, you Google becoming a guest on a podcast. And there's like a lot of services out there where you've got to do a lot of the work. And, that could feel like applying for a job on Indeed. 150 people versus having a credible source where, Brandy, if you call somebody and you say, hey, Jay wants to talk about being an entrepreneur and here's his story, and you help craft the story, at least the telling of the story, that's super valuable because it's just something else that's off my plate. I show up, I talk, and then it's done.
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty cool, right? That you can do it yourself. You absolutely can. You can pitch yourself on podcasts. You can use some online services that will like lend an assist, but it's an art, I would say.
That's
definitely.
Yeah.
It's an art and a grind. Absolutely. We're constantly trying to not only listen to what's happening, what's trending in the world, and then taking that and how is our client going to contribute to this conversation? So it's constantly paying attention and listening and then making the right content connect with the podcast.
So how old's Kitcaster now?
So Kitcaster is 6. I made it past 5 years.
I was going to say, what are you doing there?
I don't know. What should I do next?
More Kitcaster. Didn't we learn that lesson from cookies? You don't want to make a mistake you learned at 15 years old. Do what's working. How's that?
Yeah.
Unless the entrepreneurial part of, unless the self-sabotage part of entrepreneurialism is thriving, then, which is a big thing for entrepreneurs. There's plenty who do it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah, no, it's Kitcaster 6 years old and we're going strong. It's been such a fun ride. I feel so fortunate. I get to not only have conversations like this, and how cool is this? I get to facilitate this. I'm having a really good time. I hope you are.
Yeah, of course I am. I'm getting to know somebody that I didn't know. You've got an interesting story. The concept of most people, like, just to go back into your story, as a college graduate, you're 22 years old, you're married. All right. So first off, that's unique. Not the typical story.
Yeah.
And most people, when they get into that, I'm going to have a baby or 2 or 3 and raise a family, don't move further away from their family that they have a good relationship with. They move closer. So, right. And then you thrust yourself into this male-dominated industry, thrive, create a business out of another business, then meet your business partner through this extended courtship's the wrong word, but relationship of essentially being a long-term business partner to him. to a now thriving, successful business. I mean, it's a fascinating story, and it's only yours.
It's true. It is. I don't think I've ever, as you mentioned in the beginning, I've been on a lot of podcasts.
Yes.
None of which you've probably ever heard of, or any listener has ever heard of. But I've never actually told my entire story before.
Really?
Until today. Yeah.
Well, it's an interesting one because it's yours.
It is.
And that's, to me, when I think about, look, we could dive into your business. We could talk more about Kitcaster and the job you do every day, but you have a website and people could check you out. And, what they're really not going to know is, you land in Denver in this small apartment. Your husband's got a job, you don't, and now you're knocking on doors. There's gold in that for somebody, Brandy, because the same principles by which you started your career could lead somebody to do the same thing today and be successful. I don't care about AI. I don't care about email, cold physical phone calling, Indeed, all the job boards and everything, all that's bull, right?
Yeah.
You printed a resume, you knocked on a door, you literally gangstered a conversation for 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Tell me an owner of a business that's not going to be impressed by that. Give me one example of any business owner who's not going to give the person who does that and is good. I mean, you can't be you can't walk in there with a t-shirt and ripped jeans.
Right. No, I was business. I was ready. I was suited up. I was ready. I was ready for an interview because I thought that's what I was going to get.
Yeah. You got it on the way, and you got it on the way to a restroom in a hall outside elevators.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's so true. Yeah. It's really interesting, Jay. I have my oldest son is 17. He'll be going to college next year, and he's looking for a job for the summer and a service job. I really think it's important that folks work in a service position. I think if you're going to be operating out in the world, if you're going to go eat at a restaurant, if you're going to be engaging in any sort of exchange, you should have to work the other side just to have any sort of empathy and compassion for that job. So he's applying. And of course, it's all online. And he was getting incredibly frustrated. And I was like, just go in. You want to work at the ice cream shop down the street? Go in there. Talk to them. How are you supposed to stand out in this sea of sameness? Just go in there. And he was like, that is not how this works these days.
Yeah,
and I was like, no, it still is. It still is.
Of course it is. Of course it is. When I was selling for Marquis Jet, I mean, I won't even take you back to the time when, the golf event and Furyk and that. When I was selling at Marquis Jet, I was covering the Midwest. I would specifically go, they had the boards in the lobbies with all the companies that were in that building.
Yeah.
I didn't have a phone that had a camera at the time. It's 2002, 2003, like you said earlier. So I would write them down in my notebook. I would go back. I would research the company in the office the next week. I would work to get an appointment in that same building the following week. And I would, and this is before that you push the elevator button and you could only go to that floor. That's it.
Yeah.
Now, you could I never left the building. I never left the building. That was my day. I would go door to door. I used to have executive admin say to me, "You're walking door to door selling private jet time?" And
you never know.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
I would say, does the gentleman or lady that you work for, do they travel? I mean, I know they're wealthy.
Yeah.
They're in the John Hancock Tower with an office.
Right. Smartest place to be.
Well, I mean, at least I know they pay the most. So, knocking on doors always works. If you are willing to present yourself in a way that you want to be seen. If you're not willing to present yourself like that, then it doesn't work. But yeah, so I don't know. I mean, I like, this is the angle that the podcast, mine is, JaySapChats, is I want to make it chat, just a discussion. I don't want to get too deep into like, I know you and I don't know you, but I know a little bit more about you now.
Yeah. Yeah, no, this has been really fun, Jay. It's been awesome.
And honestly, ton of respect. I mean, ton of respect. Like, there are so many different ways you can go at so many inflection points in your story that could have taken you down a different route, or you could have been angry, or you could have like not been happy, I mean, even so much as you have your third child and now you're not going to get back into the work, you have to be out of the workforce. Like, you could have been mad at that. But that could have derailed you and you could have gone in a different direction. Instead, you were just like, I'm going to buckle down, and away you went again. Like, it's just a constant series of these driven decisions that you make throughout your career that make it no mystery of why you're at where you're at today. And it's been really fun to get to know you about it and see that pattern exist. So I love it.
Thank you. It's been fun to uncover that pattern, because I think when you speak it, like, I know all of these things, but I have never really thought about it in chronological order, and just from the beginning to where I'm at today and all the things that happened in between. It's great. I feel like it really kind of brought my story together.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Well, Brandy, It was a pleasure to speak with you. Our guest on JaySapChats has been Brandy Whalen. She is the co-founder of Kitcaster, which is an incredible agency. If you'd like to contact her, we're going to have a screen up that'll have her contact information, her website, her LinkedIn. Get in touch with her. Do you want me to put your address up so people can knock on your door? Or all right, we're not going to put her address up. You can't knock on her door. This was for learning purposes only. Knock on somebody's door who has an out of the house office. Kitcaster doesn't have an office, right?
Kitcaster does not have an office at this point. We are fully remote. So yeah, I would prefer not to give out my home address. I have enough human beings in and out.
Yeah. All right. How about the Starbucks that you frequent? Do you want it? No, just kidding. All right. Yeah. Brandy Whalen, everybody. I'm Jay Sap at JaySapovits, Inc. Stores. You know where to find me. It was a pleasure chatting, and we'll come back to it next week. Thank you.
Thanks, Jay.
Thanks for listening to JaySapChats. I hope you leave a little bit better than you came. And here's wishing you a beautiful week.